Hey Vikings fans, welcome into another episode of the Skol Hop. We're just a couple of dudes from Iowa who love the Vikings, drinking good beer. I'm Evan.
And I'm Austin.
And we only drink Iowa beer
We do.
on our episodes, and you brought the beer today, so
Yeah.
tell us about it.
So we do drink other beer. I feel like I always have to let people know that. Like,
There is that disclaimer.
we
yeah.
love beer. We do drink all kinds of beers. But on our show, we're Iowa boys. You're one of them. You're a Minnesotan born Twin Cities.
But I've lived here more than I lived there. So.
Sure, but I was born here. We're Iowa boys.
Yep.
Maybe we should do a TikTok about that. I don't know. Maybe that trend is already dying. But today we have a wonderful beer that I've never tried before from Big Grove Brewery, who I believe is it Coralville? Is it Iowa City?
We should confirm. Iowa City.
Iowa City.
Yeah.
I think we've said Coralville in the past. Sorry, Big Grove. But yeah, what I'm not sorry about is this delicious beer. We already filmed our TikTok, which will be out soon, where we do our first taste of this beer. Evan, we've been calling this beer by the wrong name a few times. So this one is a Big Grove Brewery. It's an American brown ale, and it is the Burch the Bear.
Burch the Bear.
Burch the Bear. We were calling it Burch the Brown Bear, but you can clearly see on the can, it's a blue bear.
He should be brown.
Evan said he is brown. It's just an infrared picture. Big Grove. Maybe you can confirm or deny for that.
He looks like he's having fun.
He is. And Evan, are you having fun drinking this beer?
I'm enjoying it.
I am too.
So, yeah. And we'll just give the listeners / viewers out there a little bit of an insight into what we're drinking. The description says it has big flavors of hazelnut and bittersweet chocolate with a sweet but crisp body.
Yeah. Also,
And I can taste all of that.
yeah, that's
It's
a
really
very
good.
accurate and good description. I like this beer. Also, one more description on the can. It's not just a regular 5.2 percenter.
Oh, yeah.
It's a solid
Solid.
in
all
5.2.
caps. Solid 5.2.
And whoever at Big Grove made that decision to write solid, you just spoke to our hearts, because we say solid beer all the time. So, yeah, this is a solid one. We're not very far into them, but towards the end of the episode, hopefully we will have finished our allotment for today and be able to give a true experienced review on it. So far, good job, Big Grove.
Yeah. Well, let's pay the bills really quick, and then we'll jump in here. So today's episode is brought to you by Big Top Ventures. To get the best rates on all-inclusive resorts in Mexico and Jamaica, send an email to bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. Once again, that's bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. Shout out to Big Top for sponsoring today.
Yeah, thanks, Big
Appreciate
Top. I actually just last night picked up friend of the show, Brian, from the airport, who through Big Top Ventures was in Jamaica for a few days. And when he left, there was no snow on the ground. I think it had snowed one day a few days earlier, but like most of it had already started melting. So when he left, there was no snow on the ground. When he came back, there was a ton of snow on the ground, like 2 feet.
It's like Elsa, like, blew her magical fairy dust or whatever, and we live in wherever Elsa lives.
Oh no, I'm the worst. I don't know where it is either.
We're girl dads. We should know this.
We are.
Anyways,
Yep.
there's a lot of snow on the ground in Iowa.
He also did not bring a coat with him.
Ooh.
Which makes sense. He was only outside in the bitter 0-degree cold, if not colder, for like 20 seconds. But yeah, he was not happy to be back in the bitter cold and snowy Iowa after spending some time in Jamaica. And I wouldn't be either.
That's rough. That's rough.
You know what else is rough, Ev?
The Vikings not being in the playoffs.
Yep. That was rough. That was tough. I still watched a lot. I didn't watch every game. And I didn't watch all of the games, most of the games that I watched. I'm trying to think if I watched a full one from kickoff to double zeros. But, I mean, I watched quite a bit of playoff football. My wife will tell you that it was on quite a bit. So it was sad not to see our beloved Vikings in the playoffs. There's some surprising games, though.
Yeah, and I think what's worse than the Vikings not being in the playoffs is two NFC North foes getting victories in the wild card round
one by a very narrow margin, the narrowest you can get, and another by just a frustratingly huge margin.
And
Man.
you wouldn't expect
No.
the Packers to have won by such a large margin.
I guess the margin's not crazy. 16 points?
But they just manhandled the Cowboys from beginning to end. I didn't watch any of the games in their entirety, but I caught snippets of them as I was doing other things, and then watched highlights and listened to some various pundits and things afterwards.
Yeah.
But
so just to give a quick recap, the Packers beat the Cowboys pretty good, 48-32. The Packers will go to, it's not technically San Francisco, but wherever they play. Is it Santa Clara?
I think.
Yeah. So the 49ers will host the Packers this coming divisional round.
Interesting side note on the Cowboys, because I just read this a few hours ago. Jerry Jones announced today that they would not be moving on from Mike McCarthy.
Yeah,
and he would be
that.
coming back.
Because there was some question marks, like, is he going to...
Yeah.
Especially with some of the names that are out there for head coaching positions. I mean, Belichick is one huge name.
Yeah. Belichick, Vrabel,
Flores.
Pete Carroll, Flores. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of big time names out there. And another interesting fact just about the Cowboys, I guess we're turning this into a Cowboys podcast now.
Not over my dead body.
Since, 1995 when they won the Super Bowl last, they've lost in the playoffs a lot. They've made it to the playoffs a lot, but they have not made it back to the Super Bowl since that 95 Super Bowl.
I thought you were going to say the stat about how the Cowboys have less playoff victories than the Texans since the Texans became a team. And the Texans, they also won. They beat, who'd they beat? The
Browns.
The Browns. Yeah.
Handily.
Yeah. Since the Texans formed as a team in 2001, 2002,
somewhere in there,
they have more playoff victories than the Cowboys do in that same stretch of time. Obviously, the Cowboys in their history have more, but still, they're not the top Texas dog in NFL teams, I guess.
That is an interesting stat. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But anyways, I thought those two things were pretty interesting. The Cowboys still can't find success in the playoffs, and Jerry Jones is going to continue to put his trust in Mike McCarthy, at least for the time being.
And maybe more surprising is the stubbornness by Jerry Jones, the GM. The owner will not fire the GM. It's the same person. And he has said before, if another person were the GM and had the same track record that he does as the GM, Jerry Jones, he would have fired that person, but he's not going to fire himself. But overall, the Packers beat the Cowboys 48-32. The Lions edged out the Rams 24-23. The Lions will host the Buccaneers in the divisional round. That was kind of a heartfelt game for a lot of Lions fans. A lot of booing of their greatest quarterback in franchise history. And I don't quite understand that. I mean...
And he didn't reciprocate in his press conference either.
No.
Matthew Stafford. Somebody asked him about it, and he's like, yeah, I still love the players, the guys on the team.
But that was his way.
But he was kind of passive-aggressively saying, no, I don't like the fans.
Well, and you could look at that and say, coaches, fans, GM, everybody involved, he's good with the players because he still probably has some former teammates on that team.
Oh, for sure.
There's a lot of turnover every year on NFL teams, but I would imagine there's still more than a couple. But yeah, for the fans to just outright boo him, it's not like he pulled a Stephon Diggs and pouted his way out of Detroit. I think he still, at least when he was first traded, did charitable things in Detroit.
Yeah. And he was traded. When you're traded, you don't really have... Unless you request a trade and go to ownership and say, I want out, it's really their discretion. I mean, you could walk into the facility on any random day and get the news that you're traded and have no control over that. That's just how it goes.
And I don't remember hearing any stories that he was trying to force his way out or trying to make sure he got traded. I just think the Lions had a valuable asset, and they, got some good value out of that asset. And I mean, how can Lions fans?
And they got a Super Bowl winning quarterback in return.
I mean, yeah, the
Lions did.
No, Goff attended there. He brought his team to the Super Bowl.
Sure. Okay.
But he lost. Who was that against? The Rams and the Patriots. It was in our building.
Okay. No, it wasn't the Patriots, was it?
Pretty sure.
Man,
because it was a few years before.
It was 2017, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been before Tom Brady left to go to Tampa.
It was the Minneapolis Miracle year.
Yeah.
No, it was not.
Sean McVay has won a Super Bowl, and Jared Goff was his quarterback.
No. Sean McVay has won a Super Bowl, and Matthew Stafford was his quarterback. Sean McVay went to the Super Bowl with Jared Goff.
Okay.
And I'm wrong. It was not the Minneapolis Miracle year, because obviously the Eagles won it that year. I think it was the year before, or
16.
maybe the year after. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it was against the Patriots.
Our Super Bowl history is kind of shaky. Sorry, everybody.
All right, TikTok, tell us how wrong we are.
We'll get straight on all that. We'll educate.
Let's just kind of whistle past the graveyard.
We're a Vikings podcast. We know nothing about Super Bowls.
Yeah, right. What's a Fran Tarkenton? The Buccaneers beat the Eagles, which I very much enjoyed watching. And I know there's only so much crap you can talk when your team didn't make the playoffs and looked terrible, but I mean,
did you see the video of the fan throwing a whole bucket of popcorn on Nick Sirianni as he walked out?
He's like, "You're done, Nick. You're done."
That just shows you how classless that fan base is.
Yeah, it's a game that you have no control over.
It's a mess out there in Philly.
Yeah, we're fans. We want our team to win. We get actually upset if they don't. We get actually happy if they do. But I mean, we're just fans. I don't know, maybe at home watching on my TV, I'll say something like, "Fire that guy." But that's actually a person. Right. I don't know. But yeah, I did see that. And that fan is not a real fan.
And Jason Kelce has kind of,
I thought I saw he announced his retirement, and then on his podcast today or yesterday kind of said hold up, nothing's for sure yet. I'll let everybody know in due time. He even said something it wouldn't be fair or appropriate or maybe even accurate if I announced a decision right now. I can respect that.
Yeah, for sure. It was just interesting. All the rumors came out that he was going to retire, and then he did come out today and say, "Oh, well, maybe, and we'll give it some more time," and blah, blah, blah.
I saw the TikTok of the New Heights podcast where he's kind of saying that. And that TikTok video kind of ended with him saying if he was retiring, other teammates coming to him and saying "Oh, that sucks. It sucks for you to go out this way." And he was pretty emotional. Don't feel bad for me. I've had a great run. It was phenomenal. And then he got understandably emotional.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a good player. I think he's a good dude. I hate his team and his team's fans, but I don't know. I can't think of any reason to not be okay with him. But yeah, he's had a good career.
Yeah, and they got just destroyed by the Buccaneers.
Yeah, and a team that, think back, all the way back to before week 1. Episode, 4 of this podcast, we were talking about ramping up against the Buccaneers. Mm-hmm. I talked a lot of trash.
Yeah.
I said something the Buccaneers don't even know who their quarterback's going to be. Well, and they're laughing last,
I picked the Vikings to beat them in week 1.
It was a surprise. I think most everyone picked the Vikings. But Baker is playing really well. He is playing himself into a more secure, higher dollar contract than the $4 million contract he got this season. I think the Buccaneers should re-sign him. If not, he's not going to get $50 million a year from any team next year, but I don't know, between 20 and 30 is my guess. He's playing his way into some decent money.
Agreed.
And maybe an option for the Vikings if Kirk is overpriced or out of range, or if he wants to move on, but that's a talker for another time.
Yeah, I can tell you right now, I don't want all the drama that comes with Baker.
I wouldn't mind it initially because I don't think he's been too dramatic.
He's been pretty
in Tampa.
quiet. He's been pretty quiet lately.
Yeah,
but he has a history.
Oh yeah,
and that would worry me, and that would be quite the whiplash from Kirk Cousins to Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, very different. But yeah, again, talker for another time. But I think he's a good option for any team that would be looking for a quarterback. All right, on to the AFC. The Texans. Now, this was a beatdown. They beat the Browns 45-14. And unfortunately, I didn't watch a minute of this game. I haven't even really seen highlights, so I don't know how horrible it was for the Browns, but man, that score tells you enough.
This was the first. It was the first of all of the playoff games.
I think so,
It was the early game on Saturday. I didn't really watch much of this one either, but yeah, just a beatdown. And a rookie quarterback, rookie head coach.
Yeah, you got to think the Texans are going to be good, even if this is it, if this is the end of their season, they lose next week. I mean, because they go to Baltimore, and that's going to be a good game, honestly. So I hope Stroud continues looking good. The defense continues looking good because I want it to be a good game. I still think the Ravens they're in my mind, they're the one that are going to win the whole tournament. I don't know who can beat them, including the Texans, but I hope for a good game.
Yeah. And then got the Chiefs owning the Dolphins, more or less. I mean, it was frigid. I think they said it was the fourth coldest game in league history.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Probably behind the 2010, was it? 2015 TCF Bank.
Oh, yeah, where the field was literally frozen. And
yeah.
I mean, I guess I don't know where that game ranks.
I think they said that was third. I think there were two other games. The Ice Bowl, Packers, Cowboys in like the 60s or 70s.
I was thinking of a different TCF Bank Stadium game. You're talking of
the
wide
playoff
left.
game. Wide left.
Oh,
yep. 10-9.
I think I blocked that one
Seattle,
out of my mind.
Over the Vikings. I think this Chiefs game was still slightly warmer than that, from what I understand. But anyways, Taylor Swift was in the press box, so it doesn't really matter. She warmed the whole place up.
Sure.
And the Chiefs got the dub.
Slightly, I don't know if it's a funny story, but I remember we're from Iowa. I had a work training one time in Texas, and at that work training, sometime in the week, everybody in the training kind of went out to dinner, and I think it was in like February time. In Texas, it wasn't one of their cold years. Somebody who was running the training, we were in a conversation about like differences in weather between Texas and Iowa and cold and what cold really is to us. And they said something like, when does it not even matter anymore? Like, how cold does it have to be before 0 and negative 100 aren't that different? I was like, well, really anytime past negative 15. And then I really thought about it. Like, that's when your eyes start kind of freezing. So if those players were experiencing that, Mahomes' helmet cracked because it was cold. The manufacturer kind of came out with a long statement. I didn't read it, but they were probably defending themselves. He didn't get a concussion, so that we know of. But yeah, it was cold. I would not want to be even a spectator at that game. I jokingly texted you a picture of ticket prices.
Yeah, $33.
Yeah, and you immediately, I think it's the fastest you've ever texted me back. You said, yeah, no. I'm out.
Well, I'm out for the temperature, but then the Vikings aren't playing either, so does it really matter at that point? But speaking of another bad weather game, the Bills-Steelers had to get moved.
Yeah.
They were supposed to play on Saturday. They got moved to Monday. And even playing on Monday, they still had snow everywhere.
I think in most of the stadium you couldn't sit down in a seat.
Well, they just opened it up. They said sit wherever you want.
Yeah,
no assigned seats.
Can you imagine that though? Like, what if you're like 10 years old and your dad's like, all right, let's go. Like, sure, I think all the tickets were pretty much general admission, so it had to be cheap to get in, which is weird because people probably already paid a lot of money for different tickets. I don't know how that all worked out. Hopefully people got their money back. But yeah, like you you get to sit anywhere, just go be there early and set up shop and bring a stove or something if it's not out of the rules. And
I saw a picture earlier today in some Vikings fan group on Facebook of a referee on the field, and another referee was like tending to him, and the caption was, it was like some playoff game in the 60s or 70s maybe, and allegedly a fan at Met Stadium in Minneapolis threw an empty whiskey bottle,
oh my god,
glass whiskey bottle, and hit the ref smack in the face from I don't know how far away. I mean, and at Met Stadium you could be pretty far away from the field because
it
it was
not a great.
It was a multi-purpose stadium.
That stadium was long gone before we were born. But
yeah, but I've seen pictures and stuff, and like depending on where you're sitting, your distance to the field is pretty far away.
Yeah, because it was like you said, a baseball stadium too.
Yeah, the Twins played there too. So, anyways, just reminded me of the Bills Steelers, and like, man, they just let anybody sit wherever they wanted to.
Yeah. Then anytime a good play happened for the Bills, you just saw clouds of snow being thrown up in the air. Yeah, that's cool. So the Bills will host the Chiefs. I saw another funny meme that was, it said like Taylor Swift walking into the nicest hotel room in Buffalo. And it was this old lady like opening the door to a dingy, gross room. And the old lady had this like grossed out look on her face. Like,
I
that's
saw that
funny.
too.
I've never been to Buffalo, but you hear the jokes. And
she'll make the trip the day of. She'll stay in New York in her flat somewhere. She'll be fine. Anyways.
Hold on. Can we just take a time out? I think we've talked enough about Taylor Swift on this podcast.
Should we just be done with that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any problem with her, but like, I don't understand the hype.
I don't either. We can move on. All right. Let's talk about our favorite moments from the season.
Yeah. I mean, back to the Vikings.
We've spent far too much time talking about 14 other teams that aren't the Vikings. Let's talk about our favorite team, and even though they're not playing anymore, let's talk about them. So you came up with the idea to identify our favorite moments from the season. So favorite moment on offense, favorite moment on defense, favorite moment on special teams.
Yep. And to be clear, I stole this idea. I was surfing YouTube, and the Vikings official YouTube page. Basically, they had a 15-minute segment with PA and Gabe Henderson and Tatum Everett, I think is her name, where they did just this. So stole the idea, but I'd made note of some of their thoughts and how that while they had great moments to choose from, I don't think we're double dipping on anything here. So,
and imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So
Skol.
All
right. So first things first, favorite moments on defense.
Why don't you start us off?
All right. I think my favorite moment on defense was the Jordan Love interception to Josh Metellus in the third quarter of the first Packer game. It was already very much trending towards the Vikings' direction in that game. Things were looking great. It's probably the highest of high. That third quarter, halfway through the fourth quarter.
Pre-snap.
Yep.
Not football snap, but Achilles snap.
But the Vikings were just giving it to the Packers at Lambeau. Everything was coming up roses. That was definitely for me the highest of the season, even after beating the Niners, I believe the week before. Maybe not.
Yeah.
But yeah, that interception for Josh Metellus, who was a backup, and this year he just flourished and blossomed into a starter and really did well, and he's like a second or alternate for the Pro Bowl. Yeah, that was my favorite defensive moment, was that just yank it, give it to me interception.
Yeah, well, it wasn't like he just leapt out of the air and plucked the ball out of the air. The receiver caught it nearly, and Metellus took it away from him.
Yeah, if not for Metellus being there, like, that would have been a completion. Like, it was a good ball and probably good decision. Could have been a touchdown or, a tackle, depending on where Metellus was, if not right there. But yeah, he gave it to me. He yanked it away. So, yeah. What about you? Favorite defensive moment?
So mine's also an interception. but a different interception. One that we were sitting in these very chairs watching the game. And I moved my microphone out of the way. I stood up and I gave you one of the best high fives I think that we've ever given each other.
Yeah, I still kind of
in our 20 plus year friendship. But that was the Ivan Pace Jr. game sealing interception against the Raiders.
Yeah, that was such a good moment.
Ugh.
Skol.
You've admitted to blacking out in that moment.
Yeah, it was, and it was probably one of the only good moments of that game, other than the benching of Josh Dobbs. That's a good moment, good defensive moment. But probably the last good moment the Vikings had.
It could be, but if you think about defense as a whole, that was the best defensive game, arguably, the Vikings played all season long. Like, yep, the Vikings had been through the ringer in terms of offense. Kirk got hurt. Dobbs had 2 amazing games and then laid a couple of eggs and got benched in that game. And Mullins came in that game. Like, offense aside, that game, the defense won that game.
Oh, yeah.
It was a 3-0 victory for the Vikings. And to pitch a shutout in the NFL is phenomenal. So that interception is the cherry on top. But I think that whole game, the defensive performance was incredible. Not to mention the fact that the Raiders went on to score 60-something points the next week.
Crazy.
Against the Chargers. Like, unreal. So, yeah.
And I believe the idea of that defensive performance in that game as a whole was Gabe Henderson's favorite defensive moment for the Vikings in that video I was talking about. So definitely a good choice. Good choice. You went a step further to name the moment.
Whittled it down to a specific play. But yeah, to echo Gabe, I guess I haven't watched that.
It's a good one. You should check it out.
Yeah, I'll have to. But yeah, that play just kind of is the cherry on top from that whole game, I think. So,
all right, moving on. Offense. What's your favorite offensive moment from the 23 season?
So I had to dig a little bit on this one. Like, man, there were some good moments. There were some bad moments. I didn't want to go with the easy pick of Dobbs doing his thing in those 2 games or whatever. Like, I didn't want to, worry about that or anything. We getting some action over there on TikTok? Is that what you're looking at?
Something popped up. I didn't know what it was.
Anyways, yeah. So I was trying not to go with those fleeting moments.
Yeah.
But for me, the Jordan Powell game winner touchdown, and for me, it's not about winning the game. That was awesome.
Yeah.
But the reaction from Kevin O'Connell afterwards, and KOC telling him this is why I brought you here, and us being able to hear that as fans in the sideline audio and stuff, I don't know, the fourth wall was shattered almost, and it just kind of brought me into being on the sideline and I mean, I didn't really know Brandon Powell. I know he played for the Falcons and he's kind of bounced around the league a little bit. But yeah, that game winner was awesome.
That was fun. And it was the culmination too. If you really look back on everything, that Falcons game was the first game after Kirk went down.
Yep.
So Vikings fans were in a whirlwind. The Vikings organization, everybody in purple was in a whirlwind overall, because you go into that game with Jaren Hall as a starter, and he looked bad for one possession and then pretty darn good for another one, and that ended with Jaren Hall going down. And then you got to put in a guy that's been on the team for 4 days or something like that.
More like 3 minutes.
Yeah, which wouldn't have happened if Nick Mullins wasn't on IR. Mullins would have started that game.
Right.
But yeah, and then he just lights it up. And just, that was the Pasternak game. That game was the most fun we had with Josh Dobbs. And that touchdown was the culmination of that. That's a good moment there.
And it's not necessarily credit to Josh Dobbs. Yep, great throw, and yeah, you had a great 4 quarters spread across 2 games. But for me, it's more about Brandon Powell.
Yeah.
Kind of the undersized underdog, kick returner, punt returner, making something of himself.
Absolutely.
And I think, we saw enough out of Jordan Powell to consider bringing him back.
Oh, yeah, I was just about to say that. I think barring any big moves in the draft or free agency, I think, how many times this year would he go most of a game and be quiet, and then the Vikings would need like a 3rd and 4, and out of nowhere, Brandon Powell gets 7 yards. Like,
here he comes.
He, for the most part, did really good. I think his low point of the season was fumbling the punt return, I think, against the Eagles after a big return. But after that, like, he did what you needed him to do. No more, no less. Things that KJ Osborne has done in the past. He was just out of nowhere, just kind of there when you needed something. And yeah, I agree. I'd be on board with bringing him back unless they upgraded somehow through free agency, or if Jalen Naylor really looks good coming into next season or something. I don't know. But yeah.
What about you?
Yeah.
Favorite moment on offense?
So I could be labeled unoriginal here because my favorite offensive moment is just moments after my favorite defensive moment. This is also in the Packer game, 3rd quarter. The Vikings just got a huge game-altering interception, and I should remember this better. I think it was the very next offensive play, the very next play.
Pretty sure you're right.
Kirk throws a dart to Jordan Addison for a touchdown, and I was that Jordan Addison's last touchdown this season? I think he had a drought at least for a while. No, because he had at least one in the Bengals game later on. But
he did Lambeau leap.
He Lambeau leaped, and then I think the next drive, or within the next few drives, Kirk got demolished. But take nothing away from that. That dart straight to Jordan Addison, to a rookie who had been looking really good already that year, or this season. The decision to just, after a big play, take a big shot, that's what you want out of your coach, to make that decision. Quarterback played it perfectly. Jordan Addison played it perfectly. It was awesome. And the cherry on top was that it was against the Packers.
Well, if you rewind the season back to that moment, and Kirk's injury doesn't happen, and JJ comes back fully healthy before the bye, and you don't lose Cam Akers, and you never even have to worry about picking up Josh Dobbs before the trade deadline, and your offensive line stays immaculately healthy. Like, you wonder where the Vikings would be right now after Wild Card Weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, the Vikings almost assuredly would have played Wild Card Weekend, and depending on how well they played down the stretch in the season, they may have been hosting a game.
Yeah, they could have won the division. I mean, shoulda, coulda, woulda. Nothing actually happened, so it's all fairy tales. But
right.
Yeah, you're right. You rewind it to that moment. Jordan Addison catching that ball is probably the happiest we were. That was our high. That's the peak of the season.
It's the high water mark for sure.
And then everything went down. We had a couple other lower peaks, but that touchdown was the highest of the season. After starting 1-4, doom and gloom, Kirk looks great, but we're going to ruin this awesome MVP-like season because the defense isn't working. And then everything starts clicking. You play decent against the Chiefs. You beat the Niners. You're kicking the crap out of the Packers. Yeah, it's a good moment. Like, if we could just live in that moment forever, that'd be great. Thus is the existence of Vikings fans. Because I think it was you that tweeted like a reaction to, maybe, I don't know if it was you, something about a few days ago when we were all reacting to the anniversary of the Minneapolis Miracle. And would it have been the anniversary? I don't know. That came up. And you said something like, it's pretty sad that that's the peak of my Vikings fanhood.
That wasn't me.
It wasn't you? Okay.
No.
I don't remember who it was.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
it's true.
That's the peak of most Vikings fanhood,
And
unless
it was in
you
the
were
freaking divisional round.
unless you were old enough to live for those Purple People Eater days back in the late 60s, early 70s when we were in the Super Bowl. How many times? But most of those guys are long gone.
Yeah, so. I mean, yeah, it's just that's my happy place of the 2023 season. We could just go back. And I think it was Madden 09. They had this feature called Madden Moments, or Madden Rewinds or something. Anyways, it was a feature. Every game, you got like 2 or 3 opportunities where if you like threw a big interception, you can like hit pause and go, I want to use my Madden Rewind. And it would go back to right before that play. And then you could keep playing the game as if that play never happened. Can we just have a Madden Rewind for earlier in the season against the Packers?
If only it worked like that.
Man.
If only it worked like that. I'm realizing maybe we should have started with special teams because I feel like offense and defense were good.
Yeah.
And honestly, to me, special teams were kind of a dud this year.
Kind of. I mean, we had a couple of...
There are a few splashes.
I mean, as we're going to outline here.
There are a few splashes. Well, I'll let you go first. Well, maybe I should go first.
Okay.
Because mine's a little more of a, like, nah. yours is better than mine.
Okay.
I'll go first.
I mean, it's your favorite special teams moment?
Yeah, well, I put a question mark next to it because I was just kind of like, I don't know. Like,
fair.
What is a good special teams moment this year? I can't really point to one.
In a 7-10 season, it's fair to say, is this a good moment? I don't know.
You stole the only good one that I could think of.
I could think of a couple more, but this is not a bad one.
Well, I picked Greg Joseph's game-winning field goal against the Raiders.
Okay.
Like,
the only score of the game.
Only score of the game. It came down to defense and special teams. Special teams got the points.
Yeah.
Good job. I don't even know how long the field goal was. It probably wasn't that long.
It was, I think, in the 20s.
But, and that comes, a week after kind of dragging Greg Joseph through the mud last week when we were talking about free agents and just saying like, yeah, he needs to go. He's one of my goners. I think he's not a guy worth keeping. Statistically, he's not a great kicker. But
it was a good moment.
Shoot, he put us over the edge to beat the Raiders.
The Skol.
All
right, mine is a little more exciting, and you're right. I probably stole one of the only great ones. But it was early on in the season against the Chiefs. Vikings were set to punt, and they ran a fake. It was a direct snap, I believe, to Ty Chandler, who got, I want to say, like 15 yards. Obviously, the first down. Man, it was so exciting. It was awesome.
It was a great fake punt.
They went on to lose the game against the Chiefs, but that was a gutsy call and a good call. And obviously it's a good call because it worked. If it didn't work, then it would have been a terrible call and we'd be trashing KOC right now. But
they ran a similar play against the Broncos, I think. I think it was a direct snap to Chandler again Monday night against the Broncos. And it worked.
There was a penalty,
down.
Right?
Maybe. I can't remember. But
there was one, I think, later on. I don't remember too much, but
we were a little distracted during the Broncos game. It was our first live stream.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So,
yeah. Shout out Tom Grassi.
Yeah. But anyways, I don't think special teams were that amazing this year. I had hoped for more. Greg Joseph proved that he's not a great kicker. Ryan Wright kind of took a step backwards, not a step forward like we had hoped for. And I really liked what Paul Allen had dubbed Ryan Wright.
the plus size punter.
The plus size punter. So I'll be really sad if he leaves.
Yeah.
Because that was fun. But if he's not good, he's got to go.
I mean, the fact of the matter is punters and kickers outside of like long snappers are the most easily replaced players on any team. Not that you're going to find an elite one all the time, but I mean, if one's not working, it's not much to just kick him to the curb and kick him to the curb. And then try to find somebody else. So
not going to kick them very far with the way they were kicking this year.
We very well could have a new punter and a new kicker for next season.
Which may not be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
But, well, let's keep hitting the rewind button.
Yeah.
And let's go all the way back to the off season. And there were some pretty big free agent pickups and some pretty big free agent departures
before this 2023 season.
Before this season, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we spent a lot of time last week talking about the lengthy laundry list of Vikings free agents going into the 24 off season.
Guys that are about to be off the team.
Correct.
Have their contracts expire.
We would like to spend some time talking about how did the 2023 season pan out for these free agents, either that were signed by the Vikings or that left the Vikings, or maybe signed new contracts with the Vikings.
Yeah. So just to kind of start off, the signees, the guys that the Vikings brought in before the season, and this may not be a comprehensive list. There's one name I'm not seeing that I didn't write down. But off the bat, we had Marcus Davenport, Byron Murphy Jr., Garrett Bradbury. He's a free agent signing because his contract had expired.
Sure.
Dean Lowry, not Deal Lowry, like I've written down here. Alex Madison, Josh Oliver, Brandon Powell, and then one that we signed during the season, Dalton Reisner.
You have that on this other sheet.
Yeah, on the other sheet. But so yeah, do we want to go through those before we talk about anything else?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could just identify. Well, we kind of did this last week, but I can tell you right now, the one that was the worst signing was Marcus Davenport.
Absolutely.
That's $13 million the Vikings will never get back.
1 year, $13 million contract, played in 4 games. I guess he had 3 starts. I would have guessed less.
He only had 2 sacks and 3 solo tackles, 4 assisted tackles.
Yep. So I got these stats from Pro Football Reference, and a stat that I did not know existed before today. I guess it's not really a stat, but Pro Football Reference attaches what they call the approximate value to players after a given season. And I took that to mean they give a 1-digit rating, essentially.
You know what it is? It's Moneyball. It's boiling things down to one number. I'm just going to try to bring up Moneyball in as many episodes as possible.
I looked up that scene that I butchered a few episodes ago, and I had the gist of it right, but man, I was way off. But anyways, the approximate value that Pro Football Reference had for Marcus Davenport was a 2. And I believe the lowest you can get is a 0. And I think the only reason he got a 2 is because he had a couple of sacks. But other than that, injuries and maybe motivation derailed his Vikings career. Hopefully he has taken all the money he will take from the Vikings. Let him be somebody else's problem. But yeah, I guess to quickly go over them, and stop me if you have a good talker. Brandon Powell, he came in as a free agent. He signed a 1-year deal for $1.2325 million.
$1.25 million.
Yeah.
We'll call it.
I mean, the $0.0025 million is still quite a bit of money. I mean, what, isn't that $25,000? Yeah, but he played in all the games, started 2 of them, had 324 receiving yards and a touchdown. He did have a fumble. I think that's the punt return fumble.
Yeah. Yep.
An approximate value of 3. Another big money guy was Byron Murphy Jr. He signed a 2-year deal. I thought it was 3, but I guess it was 2. The Vikings also like to do void years, which I'll have to pull up. I think it's Spot Rack where I was getting the contract numbers from, and they kind of do a good visual representation of those void years. I'll have to pull that up and show you. But yeah, Byron Murphy, he was injured a little bit. 14 games, he started all 14 of those. 3 picks. He's kind of meh-ish against the pass. Quarterbacks had a 97.8 passer rating against him. His approximate value, according to Pro Football Reference, was 5. And just seeing the numbers, I think anything 5 or above is kind of like, once you hit 5, you're like, all right, you're decent. You're like good. Maybe that's like a Madden 74 or something, like, like,
sure,
you're okay.
Wow, Alex Madison has a 5.
Yeah, which I don't know. Well, I mean, yeah, he signed a 2-year, $7 million, which in the grand scheme of things, for a starter, $3.5 million for a year is pretty decent. I think Dalton Reisner got around that much money. Yep. Madison, 16 games, 13 starts, 700 yards off 180 attempts. He did have 30 catches for 192 yards, and his only touchdown of the year was a reception touchdown. But he had 3 fumbles, and I would have guessed like 400 fumbles. But yeah, that.
Well, he will historically go down as the only Vikings leading rusher to not score a rushing touchdown. Yep. He has, as you mentioned, a receiving touchdown, but he did not score a touchdown on the ground, and he will, as of right now, and until someone else does it, he will be the only Vikings running back to never score a touchdown on the ground, yet lead the team in rushing yards.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think he's got a lot of value as an RB2, and him specifically convinced me of the idea that a running back is a position, but like running back number 1 is a defined position, and running back number 2 is also a defined position. You could have the NFL's history's best running back number 2, and maybe he wouldn't be a great running back number 1. And I think Alex Madison is a good case of a good running back number 2.
And I think when you start to delineate that position into those 2 different categories, as a team, you have to figure out, is our RB1 a first and second down back, or are they a third down back?
Yeah.
Where is their value found? And I don't know that, I don't know. I think Alex Madison struggled to figure out where he fit, if that makes sense.
And that goes a little bit to coaching too. I mean,
yeah.
Did they just try to plug Alex into the same role Dalvin Cook was playing? I mean, they're 2 different guys. That's a mistake.
Yep.
So
Agreed. And we saw some of those things resolve themselves when Cam Akers was signed and healthy.
Yeah.
And then he got hurt.
Yeah. But even when Cam Akers was playing, he was the running back too.
Mm-hmm.
It should have been flip-flopped. And it was pretty evident that was the case pretty early on, and they never made the switch.
And they probably should have just put Ty Chandler in from the get-go.
Maybe, yeah.
And who knows? Maybe he's the leading rusher if they would have given him the job.
Yeah.
Or at least elevated him to an RB2 type of situation right away.
Yeah. So, I guess kind of going down the list. As far as if a signing was good or bad, I think we can say the Brandon Powell signing was overall good.
Yes.
And it tips the scales to the good. Marcus Davenport, overall bad. Byron Murphy, I'd say overall good. If you had to say yes or no, I'd say overall good. Garrett Bradbury, I was concerned for a little bit after the first drive when he had that back issue flare up again. He signed a 3-year, $15.75 million contract. He played in 14 games, but missed 3 because of injury. He started all 14 of those, and his approximate value was 6. I thought there could be a point where he was done playing football. Thank goodness I was wrong, and thank goodness he came back and was not an issue.
I think he's a high IQ guy. Mm-hmm. I still think he's a little undersized at the position. And I still think there are plays where he's out-muscled just because he is smaller. But you got to wonder if there's some Jason Kelsey in him a little bit. I don't know that that's a phenomenal comparison.
No, I mean, I still think even now Kelsey is better, but I think I know what you're getting at.
I just think from a IQ standpoint, from a like, I'm gonna do whatever it takes. I'm gonna gut it out. I like Bradbury a lot.
Yeah,
I also think if Kirk isn't the quarterback, that raises some question marks at the center position as well.
Well, yeah.
I think Kirk and Garrett have developed a lot of chemistry, and that's why Garrett has been so successful. There's a lot of trust there.
But even when Kirk went down, it's not like we saw a different Garrett Bradbury. I think Garrett had a solid season.
Agreed.
And we saw a lot fewer of those obvious plays where he was just manhandled this year than we ever have before. I think this was his best year as a pro, which is great because even with missing a couple of games for that scary back injury, he came back. But yeah, I think he's good. I'm going to say for me, that's a good signing. And
he's got the highest approximate value according to PFR on this list of free agency acquisitions for the Vikings. Mm-hmm. So they must, I mean, with their algorithm, see something in him.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know how they come up with that number. It's got to be a combination of like money and stats and
there's some sort of mathematical equation going on behind the scenes there. But
other guys, Dean Lowry. Defensive lineman, 2 years, $8.5 million.
He didn't play enough.
No, I think he had two pretty significant injuries. I think he had like a quad injury and also like a pec injury at a different point in the season. I might be wrong on specifics of that, but I think twice he got knocked down pretty hard. But even going back to our earlier episodes, I'm so restless right now. I can't figure it out.
You're good.
You said that you weren't super impressed by that signing soon after they signed him. And I reminded you, like, he's not a starter signing. He's a depth guy, which, I mean, for $4.25 million a year, like that's a little bit more than depth signing money.
That's pricey, especially for an interior defensive lineman that played in 9 games and only started 4.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's $1 million to start right there.
Well, yeah, but when you sign him, you don't know he's going to only
over
play
2 years, so $500,000 to start, but still.
But yeah, 4 solo tackles, 10 assisted, a value of 2. Yeah, just not, I think mostly injuries, but also maybe they were thinking they were buying low on him and looking to see some good return, but yeah, they didn't get it. So I'm going to say overall a bad signing so far. He's still got 1 more year in his contract. 2 more guys we haven't said yet. Josh Oliver, tight end. He got some big money, some surprising money for someone who wasn't a starter previously. 3 years, $21 million. And I think at the time, 10 of it was guaranteed.
I think he earned that money. Not his receiving stats don't say that, but the hard part about the tight end position is there aren't many stats beyond receiving stats that indicate if you've done a good job or not.
I mean, you can kind of look at the overall rushing numbers to try to see if they made an impact, but that is hard to quantify.
And I know there are some advanced stats like, you know, if he's in on a run blocking or a pass blocking play and he's one of the blockers, like there are some advanced stats. I don't think with our limited budget, I don't think we have access to those. But I think he proved that he's a good tight end. Is he worth $7 million a year? Maybe. I think he's got a lot to prove next year.
But we may be relying on him quite a bit,
especially early on in the season. Yeah, if TJ's still out for a game or two, rehabbing from his ACL, it'll be interesting. But he could be, you're right, he could be tight end number 1 going into the 2024 season. So,
absolutely.
Yep.
But yeah, and then Dalton Reisner, an in-season signing, probably the biggest. He wasn't the only guy they signed during the season, but probably the biggest name. my stomach is going crazy. So he got a 1-year, $3 million contract, which I think was prorated, so a little bit less than $3 million. Played in 15 games, 11 starts. Took him really the Ezra Cleveland injury to break into not even the starting lineup, on the field, because before then it was like a couple of special team snaps here and there. But once he got in, he looked great. At a approximate value of 5, which was pretty good. I mean, one of the higher numbers on this list.
And I think, again, one of those more advanced stats that he finished the season with was he didn't allow a sack or a tackle for a loss.
Yeah.
At his position. So, to me, his approximate value of 5 is actually a lot higher than that.
Yeah.
I'd put him up at a 6 or 7 or an 8.
And maybe the same kind of play throughout 17 starts and not 11 would bump him higher. I don't know if that plays into the number.
One of my honorable mentions for best offensive play was his kick that he did. I think Josh Dobbs had run the ball himself down the field. I think this was against the Saints at US Bank, and Dobbs rushed to the ball, and Reisner just followed him down the field, and just like there's this scrum that developed around Dobbs, and Reisner just pushed him like within the 5-yard line. I mean, it was 1st and goal after that. Reisner gets up and gives the little like rock and roll kick afterwards.
The Chad Greenway kick. Yeah.
That was one of my honorable mentions for best offensive moment.
Would have been a good one. And then on the sideline, he's like, I almost kicked that guy in the face. I need to be more careful.
We made a little TikTok of that, so that was fun. But yeah, I think Reisner is a guy that you got to bring back for sure.
I'd love it, but I think he may be deservedly so pretty expensive.
Yeah.
But we were kind of thinking that last season because I think the Broncos cut him before the final year of his rookie deal. And it was kind of surprising. He was one of the higher named free agents on the board at the time. And yeah, I'd be interested to know if the Vikings ultimately gave him more money than he had been offered elsewhere, and if he just waited it out thinking he'd get more, and maybe it didn't work out for him. But I want him on our team. He's a good player, and he did well.
Well, let's talk about free agents that left the Vikings. Some pretty big names. I mean,
yeah, and I kind of grouped these in with some of the cuts the team made early on in the offseason or even throughout the summer, because that added in like Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook.
Right.
But yeah, either way, I think all of these guys that are departures, their contracts exceeded $10 million except for one that they got from other teams. So yeah. Do you wanna say the first name we got on that list?
It's bittersweet. You did gift me his jersey.
I did, yeah.
Several episodes back, but yeah, Adam Thielen, longtime Viking, signed a 3-year, $25 million contract with Carolina. Played in all 17 games for the worst team in the league.
Yeah, that had to be rough.
With a rookie quarterback, he netted just over 1,000 yards, which says something when JJ played in
10 games
and netted more than Adam Thielen.
Well, I mean, you're talking about two different calibers of player.
I know. And Adam's getting old, and he's even said as much. Like, he knows the clock is ticking, and I would be surprised if I would not be surprised if he leaves Carolina.
Interesting.
In the offseason. Would not be surprised. 4 touchdowns, an approximate value of 8, though. So
yeah, which is higher than I think most Vikings. But I don't know. Again, I don't know what that means.
I think compared to most Panthers, he's probably one of the more talented guys on their roster. So Yeah. Anyways, tough to see that guy playing in a different jersey, especially being the hometown guy that he is. Being the Minnesota product. I mean, from beginning to last year.
Yeah.
Minnesota boy all the way through.
But at the time, I mean, it made sense for the Vikings to move on. I'm sure they didn't offer him 3 years, $25 million. I think he was slated to make something like 20 just this year from the Vikings before he was cut. And he had, I think, 2 full seasons where his numbers were pretty mediocre. The writing seemed to be on the wall for the Vikings that it just wasn't there anymore. And for him to go to another team and net 1,000 yards, 100 receptions, I mean, those are good numbers. 4 touchdowns is okay, but nothing great. But the yardage and the receptions for sure. He was probably like a good cornerstone mainstay for their rookie quarterback, Bryce Young. Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if he moved on, but I don't know if he's never been, at least publicly, a guy that complains too much. On the field, he'll get emotional and try to, yell at the refs a little bit
or the other coach.
Yeah. But I mean, he seems to always be, the PR guy. He's not in the news for complaining like, I'm not getting the ball enough or I need more money or anything. But so I'd be surprised if he publicly talked his way out of Carolina. But I mean, when you're the best guy on the worst team, it's hard to stick with it. Yeah.
And I think he said as much in his kind of postseason pressers too.
Did he? I didn't see any of that.
He just kind of it was definitely under the surface. We'll see what happens from here. Who knows?
What stinks is I don't think there's, even if he were, which he shouldn't, but even if he were to say I'll take the veteran minimum, I don't think there's an obvious role for him back with the Vikings. I think their receiver room looks pretty good. At least they're 1 and 2, and then after that you can fill in from there. But that does kind of stink that he wouldn't immediately walk in as the 1 or 2. So I don't think at the end of his career, he's probably still looking to win that Super Bowl, which good for him. I hope he gets one. But yeah, it does stink that he probably won't ever play for the Vikings again.
Yeah, he might bounce around and never get one. Who knows? We'll see. A couple of Dalvins on the list here.
Got Dalvin Cook, who he was on the team when we first started this podcast.
He was.
It was episode 2 or 3 that he finally had been released. And then he was a free agent for a while. I think he had just had shoulder surgery. There it is. And I think that kept him off the field, but he seemed to luck into a beautiful situation with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and a great looking defense before the season. It looked like he was going to walk into a ring. And he signed with the Jets, 1 year, $7 million, which after the big story this previous offseason about running backs wanting to get paid, $7 million was one of the higher ones. I think Saquon Barkley got something like $10 million. But other than that, I don't know who else made more than him, more than Dalvin.
What about Derrick Henry?
I think he was...
he was on the end of his contract, isn't he?
I don't think he had to re-sign or do anything. He may have been making more than 7, but Dalvin just never did anything with the Jets. I think
he only started one game.
1 game, or 15 games and 1 start, 67 attempts, 214 yards. I mean, that's I think Cam Akers had more yards for the Vikings than Dalvin had.
Probably right.
He caught 15 balls for 78 yards, and he had 2 fumbles. I don't think he scored a touchdown this season, and an approximate value of 1. And I think Breece Hall was playing well for the Jets. The opportunities just weren't there. I think the offense looked different than they thought it would once Rodgers went down. It just never worked. But he did get cut or released. I think he asked for his release. And I think he's on the Baltimore practice squad right now.
Which could be making his way toward a Super Bowl.
He still could, yeah, which is kind of crazy. But, I don't know. I think overall that was a good release by the Vikings. And I think as much as it hurts, the Thielen release, I think overall was a good release too, especially when you think about Jordan Addison. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the Vikings just needed to clear cap space. That was the big thing going into the offseason in 2023 was there's just very limited money to do anything.
Mm-hmm. And running backs, I mean, I should get it tattooed on my body. Don't pay running backs. Just the other Dalvin Tomlinson, made by far the most amount of money from any previous Viking. He got a 4-year deal for $57 million with Cleveland. 16 starts in 16 games. 28 tackles, 12 solo, 16 assisted, 4 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. He had an assessed or approximate value of 9, which I think is the highest on all of this list.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so he must have had a lot of unsung non-stat sheet stats. I mean, he's an interior defensive lineman, so he's not going to get a lot of sacks, so 3 is pretty good. I don't think he made a ton with the Vikings before he left, so I was surprised when he initially signed that big contract with the Browns. But seems like he's pretty good.
And the Browns were a playoff team this year. I mean,
yeah.
So good for him, and hopefully it continues to work out for him in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
So
then we got Patrick Peterson, cornerback, who left the Vikings for the Steelers, where he got a 2-year, $14 million contract.
Another guy at the end of his career, probably.
Yeah, I feel like he's going to just kind of stick around. And watch, he's going to announce his retirement tomorrow, probably, now that I said that. But I feel like he's just going to be like, holy cow, Patrick Peterson's been playing since I was in kindergarten. Yeah, he had 16 starts in 17 games, 2 picks. Did pretty good. I think he had a better overall season than Byron Murphy. Definitely played more and was better against the pass. Approximate value of 6. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe the Vikings, you got to think they'd offered him a contract, but maybe it wasn't $7 million a year, or maybe they didn't offer him because, like you said, they were kind of hurting for money a little bit.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys that he's kind of in the same category as Adam Thielen, like older, plays well, still plays well, still can add value to a team, but I don't know. It just push has to come to shove at some point, and maybe he got shoved out. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Couple more. Eric Kendricks, he got cut, I think, in March. He signed with the Chargers. He got a 2-year, $13.25 million contract. 14 starts in 15 games. He, I think, was out during the game the Vikings played the Chargers in, week 3?
Yeah.
He had 3.5 sacks, 79 tackles, solo tackles, 38 assisted, and approximate value of 6. So he had an okay season, pretty good season. Starter level, was probably a bright spot on that Chargers team. It did kind of stink when they cut him. I was a little surprised when they cut him, but I think he was a cap casualty for the Vikings. And it seems like he can keep going with the Chargers.
And the last one we've got here is Irv Smith.
Yeah.
Signed a 1-year, almost $2 million contract with Cincinnati. Played in 12, started 6 games.
Mm-hmm.
Only 26 targets, 18 catches, 115 yards, and a touchdown. I feel like there were several games that T.J. Hawkinson had.
Oh yeah,
twice that.
More than
So yeah, an approximate value of 1.
Mm-hmm.
So not a big contributor in Cincinnati was Irv Smith.
I feel like he's just always been I feel like he's good. He's either been hurt or the opportunities haven't been there. I guess I admittedly don't know if he was injured this season. You got to think anytime your starting quarterback goes down, that probably hinders your numbers. But Exhibit A, T.J. Hawkinson, he had almost 1,000 yards even after, not only after, but even with Kirk going down. So,
and dealing with injury himself.
Yeah. I just, that's a good no sign. A good, I don't know, was he cut or was he just not? Did his contract run out for the Vikings?
I don't remember.
But yeah, hope the best for him. But man, it just doesn't seem like he's ever going to get it started. We've got a few more talkers here if we want to keep going. The Vikings added some players.
Yep.
Let's go with the guys that they gave new contracts to before the season.
Yeah. So, TJ.
Yeah.
Is probably the biggest.
Oh, absolutely the biggest.
4 years, $66 million. And that paid off, as you just mentioned. Almost 1,000 yards. He had 5 touchdowns. Started 11 games, played in 15. Dealt with injury, like I mentioned a minute ago. But, man, if he's healthy next year, he's tight end number 1.
Absolutely. And I had made a point more than a handful of episodes ago that maybe even in our first episode, maybe even in the episode that we have yet to release under a different name, that TJ really fills that Adam Thielen role. And I think his numbers this year absolutely proved it. He had very similar numbers this year that Adam Thielen had with Carolina this year as their wide receiver 1. And if not for the injury, TJ would have broken 1,000 yards. He had 960. I think he had more touchdowns than Thielen with Carolina. So yeah, he definitely filled that Thielen for the Vikings role. And overall, I think it's a good signing. And if he's healthy, it'll keep being a good signing.
He had 1 more touchdown.
Yeah.
Than Thielen.
Another guy, CJ Ham. You're the guy that you wanted the Vikings to cut.
You're not going to let me forget that, are you?
You did not want the Vikings to cut him. You just said he could be a surprise one. He, before the season, got a 2-year deal for $8.65 million. I thought it was a 1-year deal until I saw this today. I thought they were kind of hyping this up as like his farewell tour, but I think he's going to be back. He played in 17 games. He had 5 starts. He had 1 rushing attempt for 7 yards. Caught 7 balls for 25 yards. His approximate value is 0, which is obviously the worst you can get. I just think the Vikings don't utilize a fullback in their offense.
Yeah, and I think that's a product of Kevin O'Connell's offense, because I think prior to KOC, CJ Ham was pretty active, and he would get quite a few carries, and he would be active out of the backfield as a receiver. And I think the primary value of fullback brings you in today's NFL is as a pass and rush blocker.
Yeah. Yeah. And he may have been the best backfield pass blocker the Vikings had this year, which only is probably more of a hindrance on Alex Madison than anything else.
Right.
He may not be back next year. Just $4 million for a guy that won't produce, at least stat-wise, a lot. Especially when I mentioned last week, if you have a good tight end room, that kind of reduces your need for a good fullback. CJ is a good fullback, and if he's not on the team next year, he will be in the NFL. He's just good enough to be there. He's probably one of the better ones in the league.
He's kind of a hometown hero, too.
Absolutely.
He's from Minnesota. I think he's from Duluth, or at least at one point was from Duluth. So, yeah, he's definitely a guy that has a lot of those hometown ties, and a lot of people, including me, will be sad to see him go.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah.
Another contract that was given out before the season. Josh Metellus got an extension, 2 years for $8 million, which I think when he signed it, they tacked it on. So he had 3 years left for $13 million before this season started. He started all 17 games. He had 1 pick for 43 yards, but he played every position pretty much. 5 passes deflected, 4 forced fumbles, which is a huge number, with 1 recovery, 2.5 sacks, 78 solo tackles, and 38 assisted, which is a lot for a safety, but he played a lot of non-safety positions. His approximate value was 6, but I really think he felt like more than that.
It should be a lot higher.
Yeah, he was a good player. He really blossomed this year. And I think that was another scenario where Kwesi was giving out a contract thinking he was buying low, and he did. He definitely, if Metellus was an upcoming free agent, he'd be getting a lot more than $4 million a year right now. So, good signing.
And the last one is none other than the hitman himself, Harrison Smith. And he's one that we talked to even last week, like, man.
Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen with him.
He could be gone. We'll see. But started all 17 games. And a little bit of a downturn, I think, in terms of on-the-field production from the hitman.
But I think what he gives to the team is so much more valuable than just the numbers on the field.
He's a leader for sure.
I mean, just the play where Byron Murphy got an interception, and it's because Harry was saying, you take it, this is yours, when Harry could have easily picked it off himself. But we mention him here because before the season, I think they may have approached him. He's getting up there, a high salary player. He actually took a salary reduction for this season by $6.7 million. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, I think I looked it up. He's made almost $90 million in his career, which for safety, that's pretty good.
That's really good.
I'm not going to, I wouldn't say no to that. So I think his main concern isn't solely based on every dime you can get, even though I always say NFL players should fight for every dime they can, but I think he just loves being a Viking, and hopefully he can continue being a Viking.
Let's hope so. But we'll definitely have to talk about kind of like we did going into this season, like who stays, who goes, who could be a surprise cut.
Yep.
There are so many variables, especially with 24 plus. I think it actually changed. I think we said there were 24 free agents last week. I think it's actually 25.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I think we missed one. I don't know who we missed, but I think our numbers were slightly off. Anyways, we're not statisticians.
No.
We don't claim to be perfect, but gosh, there's a lot that's going to happen this offseason, and it'll be kind of chaotic at times to track all that. But
oh yeah. What do you think? Should we talk about how the draft picks went now, or should we kind of save that for a closer to the draft episode?
I'm thinking we should save that closer to the draft.
I agree.
We can kind of double up and talk about last year's draft picks and how they impacted the team this year or didn't for some of them. And then look ahead to what positions the Vikings need to draft, that sort of thing. Because that's definitely a big talker right now, too, in the Vikings.
Oh, absolutely.
Sphere is, what are we going to do with the draft? And I think as of today, we're 99 days away
from
the draft. So 100 days yesterday, 99 days away today. So just a handful of episodes before we get to the actual draft.
Yeah. And we're going to keep going at least weekly through the Super Bowl, or up until the Super Bowl.
Yep.
But yeah.
We got plenty to talk about,
I
guess, is the point I'm trying to make. So
what'd you think of the, dang it, what's the name? The Burch the Bear.
Burch the
Burch the Bear from Big Grove Beer.
The
brewery.
American Brown Ale. I liked it.
I did too.
Hazelnut, chocolate, really good.
Oh yeah. I would definitely try it again.
Yep.
I don't think I've said I wouldn't try it again for any of these beers that we've had, but this one for sure. I'll seek it out.
Definitely a solid.
Oh my gosh.
5.2.
Oh yeah.
Definitely. So yeah, would recommend 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, whatever your scale is. I would rank it up there.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
I like it.
So, all right. Well, we'll put the kibosh on this one for today.
Yeah.
And
everybody reach out to us on our socials. We're everywhere at the Skol Hop. Send us an email. We still have some stickers we want to give out. We still have a t-shirt we're trying to give away.
Yep.
Email is theskolhop@gmail.com. And yeah, just Google us. You'll find us.
We're out there.
We are.
So, all right. Well, good beer, good episode.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Till next time.
Skol.
Skol.
Hey Vikings fans, Evan here from the Skol Hop, and we just wanted to say thank you again so much for listening to the Skol Hop, and we also wanted to take one more opportunity to let you know that this episode of the Skol Hop has been brought to you by Big Top Ventures. If you're considering taking an all-inclusive trip to either Mexico or Jamaica, reach out to our friends at Big Top Ventures at bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. Once again, that's bigtopventuresllc@gmail.com. You can get the lowest rate possible on several all-inclusive resorts throughout the region. Big Top Ventures, step right up to your next big adventure. And thanks again for listening to the Skol Hop. Skol.